Hey, so tonight we're going to talk about something that might make you grateful for your modern bedroom. We're diving into the intimate realities of Tudor England, where romance was political, privacy was impossible, and your wedding night might literally be a matter of life and death, not the version you see in period. Dramas with passionate embraces and candlelit chambers, but what it would actually feel like to navigate love, marriage, and intimacy in a world where your body belonged to everyone except yourself. If you're enjoying these deep dives into history's hidden corners, I'd love a like or subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. There's something comforting about knowing we're all drifting through history together. So find your cozy spot. Pull up those covers. Take a slow, deep breath, and let's drift back to Tudor England, where even the most intimate moments were anything but private. You are standing in a stone chamber at Hampton Court Palace, candlelight flickering against tapestried walls that seem to close in around you. The year is 1520. And you've just been married to a man you met 3 hours ago during the wedding ceremony itself. Your hands are trembling, not from the February cold seeping through the thick walls, but from the knowledge of what comes next. The heavy oak door creaks open on iron hinges, and a parade of courtiers enters your chamber like actors taking the stage for a performance you never auditioned for. Their voices echo off the stone walls as they approach your marriage bed, a massive 4-poster draped in rich burgundy velvet that feels more like a scaffold than a sanctuary. You can smell the wine on their breath, the musk of their unwashed bodies beneath expensive perfumes, and the acrid smoke from the torches that cast dancing shadows across their faces. These are England's most powerful nobles, and they've come to witness your most vulnerable moment as if it were a state ceremony. The Duchess of Norfolk steps forward, her jeweled fingers cold against your skin, as she begins unlacing your wedding gown. The silk and cloth gold that took 6 seamstresses 3 months to create falls away piece by piece, each layer of fabric, another barrier between you and complete exposure removed with ceremonial precision. Other women join her, ladies in waiting whose names you don't know but whose eyes you can feel cataloguing every imperfection of your body. They comment on your skin, your posture, the way you hold yourself, as if you're a prize mare being evaluated for breeding potential, which in many ways you are. Your corset comes away with a whisper of silk against skin, and you're left standing in nothing but a thin linen shift that might as well be transparent in the flickering candlelight. The fabric clings to your body, revealing every curve and contour to the assembled audience who study you with the intensity of scholars examining a manuscript. Meanwhile, your new husband is brought forward by his own entourage of nobles, their faces flushed with wine and anticipation. The Earl of Surrey claps him on the shoulder while making a crude joke about marital duties that sends ripples of laughter through the crowd. Your husband looks as uncomfortable as you feel, his eyes darting between your face and the floor, never quite meeting your gaze directly. The Bishop of Winchester steps forward, his heavy robes rustling like autumn leaves in a winter wind. He raises his jeweled hands and begins to bless your union once more, his Latin words washing over you like water over stone. The irony isn't lost on you. A celibate man blessing an act he's never experienced, in a language most people don't understand. For an audience that treats it like entertainment, you're guided toward the bed by gentle but insistent hands, the mattress creaking under your weight as you're positioned like pieces on a chessboard. The sheets are finest linen, imported from Flanders and embroidered with your new family's coat of arms. A reminder that even this most intimate moment serves political purposes larger than your personal comfort. You can hear your own heartbeat echoing in your ears as the curtains are drawn round the bed, but the voices don't fade. They remain just outside the heavy fabric, waiting, listening, commenting on every sound that escapes through the velvet barrier. Someone makes a joke about the length of time this is taking. A nervous laughter follows. Your husband's hands are cold and shaking as he reaches for you. In the darkness within the bed curtains, his breath smells of wine and fear, and you can feel his heart racing against your chest as he positions himself above you. There's no tenderness here, no whispered words of comfort or reassurance, only duty, performed under the scrutiny of an audience you cannot see, but can certainly peer, breathing just beyond the fabric. Asterisk, asterisk. The act itself is mercifully brief, but awkwardly painful. No one has explained to you what to expect, how to position yourself, or what sensations might occur. Your education in feminine accomplishments included music, dancing, and needlework, but somehow omitted any practical knowledge about the most fundamental aspect of married life when it's over, completed in silence, except for your husband's labored breathing and your own sharp intake of breath at the moment of penetration. The curtains are pulled back once more. The same hands that undressed you now examine the sheets with the thoroughness of investigators searching for evidence of a crime. The crimson stain they're looking for is there. Thank God. But even this proof of your virtue becomes a subject of public discussion. The Duchess nods approvingly while making comments about the amount and placement of the blood, as if your hymen were a wax seal on an important document that required authentication. You close your eyes and try to disappear. Dint the mattress as voices discuss your body like it's a piece of property that's just been appraised and found satisfactory. The bishop offers another blessing, this time for your fertility and the hope of male heirs, while courtiers begin placing wagers on when you'll announce your first pregnancy. This is your wedding night in this Tudor England, not a celebration of love or the beginning of a romantic partnership, but a public verification of a political transaction. Your virginity has been confirmed, your marriage has been consummated, and your reproductive potential has been blessed by the church and witnessed by the state. As the crowd finally begins to disperse, leaving you alone with your new husband, in the flickering candlelight, you realize that your body no longer belongs to you. It belongs to your husband, to his family, to the political alliance your marriage represents. and to the future heirs you're expected to produce. Your wedding night is over, but your performance as a Tudor wife has only just begun. You are Catherine, Bai of Aragon, and you're lying in your royal bed at Greenwich Palace, staring at the carved ceiling above you, where golden angels seem to mock your earthly struggles. The year is 1511, and you've just lost another child, your fourth miscarriage in as many years, each one taking away another piece of your heart and your hope. The Spanish prayers your mother taught you whisper through your mind like a rosary of grief. Santa María, Madre de Dios, ruega por nosotros pecadores. Each word is a plea for understanding, for mercy, for the miracle of a living son that seems to slip further from your grasp with each passing month. Your hands rest, born your empty womb, still tender from the loss that came just 3 days ago. The court physicians have bled you to balance your humors, leaving you weak and dizzy. But they offer no real explanations for why your body continues to fail in its most essential function. You can hear Henry's footsteps in the corridor outside, heavy boots echoing against the stone floors with the measured pace of a man carrying the weight of a kingdom's expectations. When he enters your chamber, his face carries that familiar mixture of disappointment and determination that has become as familiar as your own reflection in the polished silver mirror. He doesn't speak of love anymore. Those early days of your marriage, when he called you his most beloved Catherine and wrote you poetry comparing your beauty to the dawn, feel like someone else's memories now. Instead, he approaches your bed with the mechanical precision of a man performing a royal duty, his hands already working at the ties of his doublet with practiced efficiency. You close your eyes and let your mind drift to the orange groves of due childhood in Spain, where the air was warm and sweet with citrus blossoms, and your body belonged only to God and your own innocent dreams. Here in England, your body is a vessel for the Tudor dynasty, a repository for hopes and fears that have nothing to do with your own desires or comfort. The act itself is brief and silent, conducted in the darkness of a chamber that smells of beeswax candles, rose petals scattered by your ladies-in-waiting, and the underlying scent of disappointment that seems to permeate everything in your married life. Henry's breathing is labored, not from passion, but from the weight he's gained and the pressure that follows him everywhere he goes, like a shadow. His body, once athletic and graceful, has grown heavy with rich foods and the sedentary life of a king who spends more time in council chambers than on horseback. When he moves above you, you can feel the dampness of his skin, the way his breath comes in short gasps, and the mechanical nature of his movements that speak of duty, real desire. Afterward, you immediately slip from the bed and kneel on the cold stone floor beside it, your knees pressing into the unforgiving surface as you begin your prayers to the Virgin Mary. Your Spanish accent makes the Latin prayers sound different from the English ones. And sometimes you wonder if God understands your foreign tongue, or if your words are lost in translation between heaven and earth. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum. The familiar words provide comfort even as they remind you of your failure. Mary, the perfect mother, who conceived without sin and delivered the Savior of the world, everything you are not and cannot be. Days pass in anxious waiting, your ladies in waiting, watching for signs of pregnancy with the intensity of astronomers, studying the stars for portents. Every missed meal becomes a cause for hope. Every moment of nausea a potential miracle. Every change in your complexion a subject of whispered speculation that spreads through the court like ripples in a pond. Your Spanish ladies, led by Doña Elvira Manuel, maintain a constant vigil over your body and behavior. They monitor your appetite, your sleep patterns, your monthly cycles with the dedication of scholars studying sacred texts. Their devotion is touching but also suffocating. You cannot even experience your own body's rhythms without them, becoming matters of state concern when your monthly bleeding arrives, right on schedule, like a cruel reminder of your body's rebellion against your will. The disappointment ripples through the court like a stone dropped in still water. You see it in the faces of your servants, who avert their eyes when they changed your linens. You hear it in the sudden silence that falls when you enter a room where courtiers were discussing the succession most painfully. You feel it in the way Henry's visits to your chamber become less frequent, more perfunctory, as if he's gradually losing faith in your ability to fulfill your most basic function as his wife. The passionate young king who once declared he would move heaven and earth to marry, you now approaches your bed with the enthusiasm of a man completing an unpleasant but necessary task. Your confessor, Father Diego Fernandez, tries to comfort, beard you with theological explanations about God's will and the mysterious ways of divine providence. But his words feel hollow when you're lying in bed at night, listening to Henry's snores beside you and wondering if your womb is cursed, if your Spanish blood is somehow incompatible with English soil, if God is punishing you for some sin you cannot identify. The pressure intensifies with each passing year. You are 35 years old now, and you can feel time slipping away like sand through your fingers. Your mother, Isabella of Castile, had borne 5 children by the time she was your age. Your sister, Juana, despite her madness, has given birth to 6 healthy children. Only you, the daughter who was supposed to secure the most important alliance, seem unable to fulfill your biological destiny. Your body, once young and hopeful, now carries the weight of failed expectations and the growing certainty that you may never give. England, the son it desperately needs, your breasts, who should have nursed royal heirs, remain empty. Your arms, which should have cradled princes, hold only the phantom weight of children who never drew breath. The court physicians offer increasingly desperate remedies, special diets, herbal concoctions, bloodletting, and purging treatments that leave you weak and nauseated, but no more fertile. They examine your urine, study your complexion, and debate the balance of your humors with the intensity of theologians arguing about the nature of the Trinity. But you know, in the deepest part of your heart, that medicine cannot cure what ails you. Your problem is not physical but spiritual. You are a woman caught between two worlds, Spanish and English, Catholic and increasingly Protestant, fertile in hope, but barren in reality. Sometimes, in the darkest hours before dawn, you allow yourself to imagine what your life might have been if you had remained in Spain. If you had married a Spanish nobleman who would have been content with daughters. If you had never become the focal point of England's dynastic anxieties. But these thoughts are dangerous luxuries that you quickly push away, focusing instead on your prayers, your duties, and the diminishing hope that God might still grant you the miracle of a living son. You are Catherine of Aragon, Queen of England, and your body belongs not to yourself, but to the realm that depends on your fertility for its future stability. The weight of that responsibility grows heavier with each passing day, each failed pregnancy, each disappointed look from your husband who once loved you but now sees you primarily as an obstacle to his dynasty's continuation. You are Anne Boleyn, and you're standing at your window in the Tower of London, watching the Thames flow past, like liquid silver in the moonlight. Tomorrow, you will die. And tonight, you're remembering the moment when everything began to unravel. Not when you failed to give Henry a son, but when you succeeded in making him believe you could. 6 years ago, you were the most desired woman. In England, the one who had captured a king's heart and changed the course of history, through nothing more than the calculated withholding of your body. You had learned the art of seduction at the French court, where flirtation was a language as complex as Latin, and desire was a weapon to be wielded with the precision of a master swordsman. You remember the first time Henry's eyes found you across a crowded hall at Greenwich Palace, the way his gaze lingered on your long neck, your dark eyes, and the French fashions that set you apart from the other English ladies, with their conservative dress and demure manners. Unlike your sister Mary, who had given herself to the king and been discarded like yesterday's flowers, you understood that power lay not in surrender, but in resistance. The French court had taught you that anticipation was more powerful than boss satisfaction, that a man would move mountains for what he couldn't have, while barely noticing what he possessed. So you began the most dangerous game of your life, seducing the King of England, while never allowing him to claim the prize he sought. For 6 years, you danced just beyond his reach, allowing him to kiss your hands, but never your lips to write. You passionate letters, but never to claim your body completely. You made yourself indispensable, not just as an object of desire, but as an intellectual companion who could discuss theology and politics with equal skill, who could challenge his ideas without threatening his authority. The tension was exquisite and exhausting, living in a constant state of arousal and denial, watching Henry tear apart his marriage, his kingdom, and his relationship with Rome, all for the promise of possessing you completely. You gained the center of a political and religious revolution, the woman for whom England broke with the Catholic Church and risked war with the Holy Roman Empire. Your apartments at court became a salon where Protestant ideas flourished, where reformist theologians found patronage, and where the future of English Christianity was debated by candlelight. You introduced Henry to the works of William Tyndale and other reformers, not just because you believed in their ideas, but because their theology conveniently supported Henry's desire to divorce Catherine and marry you. The sexual politics were incredibly complex. You had to remain desirable enough to keep Henry's interest, while virtuous enough to avoid the fate of discarded mistresses. You had to be intellectually stimulating without appearing too learned, politically useful without seeming manipulative, and sexually alluring while maintaining your reputation for chastity. Your wardrobe became a weapon in this campaign. You wore French fashions that emphasized your slender neck and small waist, chose colors that complemented your dark hair and pale skin, and adorned yourself with jewels that caught the light and drew attention to your movements. Every appearance at court was a carefully choreographed performance designed to remind Henry of what he was fighting for. The letters Henry wrote to you during this period reveal the intensity of his obsession. I beseech you to let me know expressly your whole mind as to the love between us two, he wrote, his usual royal composure cracking under the strain of unfulfilled desire. His correspondence reads like the work of a lovesick teenager rather than a powerful monarch, filled with protestations of devotion and barely concealed sexual frustration. But your strategy came with enormous risks. For 6 years, you lived in a constant state of political danger and social ostracism. Catherine's supporters openly called you a whore, even though you were technically still a virgin. Courtiers who had once courted your favor now whispered about you behind your back, calling you an ambitious upstart who had bewitched the king through supernatural means. The Holy Roman Emperor was threatening war if Henry divorced his Aunt Catherine, and you knew that if the political winds shifted, you could easily find yourself in the Tower facing charges of treason. Every day brought new rumors about papal excommunication, foreign invasion, or domestic rebellion, all because you had refused to become just an ethereal mistress. By 1532, the pressure had become unbearable. You were 25 years old, practically an old maid by Tudor standards, and still unmarried despite being the most famous woman in Europe. Henry had broken with Rome, declared himself head perv of the English Church, and thrown the country into religious chaos, all for the promise of marrying you and getting legitimate sons. The strain was showing in your behavior. Court observers noted that you had become more temperamental, more demanding, quicker to anger when things didn't go your way. The careful self-control that had served you so well was beginning to crack under the weight of 6 years of constant performance and political pressure. Finally, sometime in late 1532, you gave in. Whether it was because you genuinely believed Henry would marry you, because the political situation demanded it, or because you simply couldn't maintain the charade any longer, you allowed Henry into your bed. The act that you had withheld for 6 years was completed in a matter of minutes, and you immediately became pregnant. The irony was bitter. After years of careful calculation and strategic denial, your downfall began the moment you achieved your goal. The seductive, untouchable mistress became a pregnant woman with expectations and demands. and Henry's fascination began to curdle into resentment almost immediately. Your secret marriage in January 1533 was a rushed affair, conducted with you already showing and half the nobility boycotting the ceremony. The coronation that followed was marked by public hostility. Londoners refused to cheer, and many nobles stayed away in protest. You had won the crown, but at the cost of popular support and political stability. When Elizabeth was born in September 1533, the disappointment was crushing. After all the drama, all the political upheaval, all the religious revolution, you had produced another daughter. Henry was polite about it, but you could see the disappointment in his eyes. The way he looked at your child as if she were a beautiful but ultimately useless ornament. The sexual dynamic between you and Henry changed immediately after Elizabeth's birth. The woman who had captivated him with her wit and independence now seemed needy and demanding in his eyes. You had never learned how to be a submissive royal wife, because your entire appeal had been based on being challenging and unattainable. Your subsequent pregnancies ended in heartbreak, miscarriages that felt like small deaths, each one taking away another piece of your security and Henry's affection. The pregnancy that ended in 1536 may have been a male fetus, which made the loss even more devastating. You had come so close to giving Henry what he wanted, only to have it slip away like water through your fingers. By 1536, Henry had found a new obsession, Jane Seymour, who represented everything you weren't: quiet, submissive, and fertile-looking. The man who had moved heaven and earth to marry you was now looking for ways to get rid of you, and you knew that your fate would be far worse than Catherine's exile. Your final months were a nightmare of paranoia and desperation. You knew that Henry was building a case against you, that your enemies at court were gathering evidence of your supposed crimes, that your days were numbered. The woman who had once controlled the most powerful man in Europe through sexual politics was now completely powerless, trapped by the very system she had tried to manipulate. On May 19th, 1536, you were executed on charges of adultery, incest, and treason, charges that most historians agree were fabricated. Your real crime wasn't sexual misconduct. It was failing to understand that in Tudor England, a woman's power was always temporary, always conditional, always subject to the whims of men who held the real authority. As you prepare for tomorrow's execution, you understand that your greatest mistake wasn't failing to give Henry a son. It was believing that sexual power could be transformed into lasting political influence. You had played the game better than anyone before you, but the rules were rigged from the beginning. You touch your neck where the sword will fall tomorrow, and you almost feel grateful that the waiting is finally over. You are the daughter of a wool merchant in London, and you're lying in your marriage bed above your father's shop, listening to the sounds of the city awakening below as cartwheels rumble over cobblestones and vendors begin their morning calls. Your husband of 3 months is already dressed and preparing for his morning rounds, his noble blood requiring him to maintain appearances even though your dowry pays for his fine clothes and keeps his creditors at bay. The morning light filters through expensive glass windows, a luxury your father installed specifically to impress potential suitors and demonstrate the family's rising prosperity. The light illuminates the Flemish tapestries that cover the walls, depicting scenes of courtly love that bear no resemblance to your own marital experience, and the carved oak furniture that speaks of money carefully spent to buy respectability. Your husband, Sir Thomas Whitmore, moves around the chamber with the careful precision of a man who has learned to hide his resentment behind a mask of aristocratic composure. He needs your father's money to maintain his estates and pay off the gambling debts that nearly landed him in debtor's prison. But he despises needing it, and that resentment colors every interaction between you like smoke from a poorly tended fire when he comes to your bed at night. It's with the mechanical efficiency of a man fulfilling a contract rather than expressing affection. There's no tenderness in his touch, no attempt to discover what might bring you pleasure, no recognition that you might have desires or preferences of your own. Only the swift completion of his marital duties and the hope that you'll conceive quickly enough to justify the financial arrangement that binds you together. You've been educated better than most women of your station. You can read Latin as well as English, write in a clear hand, and manage household accounts with skill that would impress many men. Your father, understanding that knowledge was as valuable as gold in the changing world of Tudor commerce, hired tutors to teach you mathematics, geography, and even some basic law. But this knowledge becomes another source of tension in your marriage, as your husband expects you to be both intellectually capable and completely submissive, practical enough to manage complex financial matters, but feminine enough never to challenge his authority. You're supposed to be worldly enough to understand business, but innocent enough to maintain your reputation, confident enough to navigate merchant society, but modest enough to reflect well on his noble status. Your body has become a battleground, where class and gender expectations clash with uncomfortable intensity. Your husband's family expects you to behave like a proper noble wife, decorative, deferential, and focused primarily on producing heirs. Your own family expects use your position to advance their commercial interests and social standing. You're caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. The pressure to conceive weighs on you like a physical burden that grows heavier with each passing month. Every cycle that passes without pregnancy is a month of failure, a reminder that you haven't yet fulfilled your primary function in this carefully negotiated arrangement. Your monthly bleeding becomes a source of shame rather than a natural bodily function, evidence of your inadequacy rather than simply biology. When you do become pregnant, the experience is colored by financial anxiety as much as physical discomfort. Children are expensive investments that must be carefully managed. Too many will bankrupt the family. Too few will leave you vulnerable in old age. Sons must be educated and established in business or minor clerical positions. Daughters must be married well enough to maintain the family's rising status. You find yourself calculating the cost of each pregnancy against the potential returns. measuring love in terms of dowries and inheritance, viewing your own fertility as a business asset to be managed with the same care your father applies to his wool trade. The romantic ideals depicted in the tapestries on your walls seem like fairy tales compared to the harsh economic realities of your daily life. Your husband's friends, younger sons of noble families who have also married merchant wealth, visit regularly to drink your father's expensive wine and complain about the indignities of depending on trade money. Their conversations, which you overhear from the next room, reveal their true feelings about their merchant wives, necessary evils to be endured for financial survival, breeding stock with dowries attached. The sexual aspect of your marriage reflects these class tensions in intimate and uncomfortable ways. Your husband approaches your body with a mixture of entitlement and distaste, as if your merchant origins somehow contaminate even your most private moments together. He performs his duties efficiently, but without pleasure, treating your body like a piece of property he's been forced to accept as part of a business transaction. Your own desires and preferences are never considered or discussed. No one has ever asked what you might want from physical intimacy, what might bring you pleasure or satisfaction, whether you have any preferences about timing, frequency, or technique. Your role is to submit gracefully and conceive regularly, nothing more. The merchant community watches your marriage with intense interest, seeing it as a test case for their own social ambitions. If you can successfully navigate the transition from merchant's daughter to nobleman's wife, you'll pave the way for other advantageous matches. If you fail through scandal, infertility, or inability to maintain your husband's interest, you'll damage the prospects of every other merchant family hoping to buy their way into the nobility. Your mother visits weekly, bringing news from the shop and subtle reminders of your obligations to the family that invested so heavily in your marriage. She examines your appearance for signs of pregnancy, critiques your household management, and offers advice about maintaining your husband's favor that reduces your marriage to a series of strategic maneuvers rather than a personal relationship. The servants in your household, caught between your merchant origins and your husband's noble status, treat you with a mixture of respect and subtle condescension. They know you're not truly one of them. Your accent, your mannerisms, your practical approach to household management all mark you as different from the noble ladies they're accustomed to serving. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, when your husband is still asleep beside you, you wonder what it would feel like to be touched by someone who desired you rather than your dowry, to be valued for something other than your ability to produce heirs and manage accounts, to have your intelligence appreciated rather than merely tolerated. But these thoughts are dangerous luxuries that you quickly push away, focusing instead on the practical realities of your carefully constructed life. You have achieved what your father dreamed of, a title, a place in noble society. The possibility that your children will be accepted as gentlefolk rather than mere merchants. The price of that achievement is your body, your autonomy, and your dreams of romantic love. But in Tudor England, that's considered a fair trade for a merchant's daughter who dared to reach above her station. You are a peasant woman lying on a straw. mattress in a one-room cottage that smells of smoke, sweat, and the animals that share your living space during the harsh winter months. Your husband's family surrounds you in the darkness. His parents, 3 siblings, 2 cousins, and whatever livestock you can afford to keep indoors, all breathing in the same stale air that hasn't been properly ventilated since the cottage was built. The cottage walls are thin timber and mud, offering little protection from the wind that whistles through gaps in the construction, like the voices of the dead. In winter, you huddle together for warmth, your bodies pressed against each other not from affection, but from the desperate need to survive another night, when the cold could literally kill you in your sleep. Your wedding night took place in this same space 6 years ago, with your new in-laws listening to every sound, offering commentary and advice that made your face burn with shame, even in the darkness. There was no romance in the coupling, only the swift completion of a transaction that bound 2 families together in mutual dependence, pooling their meager resources in the hope of collective survival. Your husband's hands are rough from field work, his body lean from the constant threat of hunger that shadows every peasant family like a wolf circling a campfire. When he comes to you at night, it's with the exhausted desperation of a man who knows that children are both a blessing and a burden, necessary for survival, but dangerous to support when there's barely enough food for the adults. You've been pregnant 4 times in 6 years of marriage, your body following the brutal rhythm of peasant fertility, where pregnancy and nursing provide the only reliable form of birth control. 2 children survived their first winter, Mary, now 5, and John, 3. But they're both small for their ages, their growth stunted by irregular meals and the diseases that sweep through peasant communities like wildfire. Your 3rd pregnancy ended in a stillbirth after a difficult labor that nearly killed you, the baby's tiny body perfectly formed but lifeless, as if it had looked at the world waiting for it and chosen not to enter. The 4th was a son who lived for 6 weeks, before succumbing to the fever that claimed 3 other infants in the village that winter. Each pregnancy is a gamble with death, each birth a miracle that might not be repeated. You've seen too many women die in childbirth, their bodies simply unable to survive the trauma of delivery combined with malnutrition and exhaustion. The village graveyard is full of young mothers who died trying to give their families the children they needed to work the land. The village midwife, old Margaret, attends your labors with herbs and folk wisdom passed down through generations of women who learned their craft through trial and error. There's no medical knowledge here, no understanding of infection or anatomy, only the desperate hope that this time both mother and child will survive the ordeal. Margaret's remedies are a mixture of practical knowledge and superstition. Willow, bark tea for pain, prayers to Saint Margaret for safe delivery, iron nails driven into the birthing bed to ward off evil spirit, and positioning techniques that sometimes help but often don't. When complications arise, her options are limited to prayer and hope. Your body bears the marks of this harsh life, scars from accidents in the field, calluses from endless work, the stretched skin and aching back that come from repeated pregnancies. Ban constant physical labor. You've never seen yourself in a mirror, never had the luxury of considering your own beauty or desirability. Your worth is measured entirely in terms of your ability to work and bear children. Sex in your marriage is brief and practical, conducted in darkness and silence to avoid waking the others who share your space. There's no time for tenderness, no energy for exploration, no privacy for intimate conversations. Only the swift completion of acts that might result in the children you need to help work the land and support you in old age. Your husband, William, is not unkind, but he's shaped by the same brutal necessities that govern your life. He works from dawn to dusk in the fields, comes home exhausted and hungry, and has little energy left for anything beyond the basic requirements of survival. Romance is a luxury that peasant families cannot afford. You know folk remedies for preventing pregnancy, herbs that might delay conception, techniques that might reduce the chances of quickening, timing methods based on the phases of the moon and your monthly cycles. But using them risks accusations of witchcraft from neighbors who watch each other's behavior with suspicious eyes, and failing to use them risks death from too many pregnancies too close together. The Church's teachings about sexuality add another layer of complexity to your already difficult life. Father Benedict preaches that sex is only acceptable for procreation, that pleasure is sinful, that women's bodies are sources of temptation that lead men astray. But he's never been hungry, never watched a child die from lack of food, never had to choose between feeding your family and following religious law. Every choice you make about your body is a calculation of survival. Every intimate moment shadowed by the knowledge that pleasure is a luxury you can't afford, and pregnancy is a danger you can't avoid. Your fertility is not your own. It belongs to your family's survival strategy, your village's economic stability, and God's mysterious plan for your suffering. The other women in the village share their own stories of loss and endurance. During the brief moments when you gather at the well or work together in the field, Agnes lost 3 children to the sweating sickness. Joan died in childbirth last spring, leaving for orphans. Emma has been pregnant 8 times, but only has 2 living children to show for it. These conversations are your only form of sexual education, whispered warnings about the dangers of pregnancy, folk remedies that might ease labor pains, techniques for surviving the physical demands of repeated childbearing. No one speaks of pleasure or desire. Those concepts belong to a world of leisure and security that peasant women never enter. Your children, when they survive, become part of the family labor force as soon as they can walk. Mary already helps with simple tasks around the cottage, and John will soon be old enough to help his father in the field. Their childhood is brief and practical. There's no time for play. When survival requires constant work, you love them with a fierce intensity that's tempered by the knowledge that loving too deeply makes loss unbearable. Every peasant mother learns to hold something back, to protect her heart against the grief that comes with watching children die from diseases that could be prevented, accidents that could be avoided, or simple malnutrition that slowly steals their strength. As you drift towards sleep, listening to the breathing of your family around you and the wind howling through the gaps in the walls, you sometimes dream of a world where your body belongs to you alone, where pregnancy is a choice rather than a biological inevitability, where love might actually have a Cencetto flourish. But these dreams fade with the dawn, replaced by the endless cycle of work, worry, and the desperate hope that tomorrow will bring enough food to keep everyone alive another day. In Tudor peasant society, sexual satisfaction is a luxury you can't afford. Privacy is impossible, and your body belongs to your family, your village, and your God, but never to yourself. You are Jane Seymour, and you're lying in your childbed at Hampton Court Palace, feeling the life slowly drain from your body as puerperal fever burns through your veins like liquid fire. 12 days ago, you gave birth to Edward VI, the son that Henry VIII had been desperately seeking for nearly 30 years. And now you're paying the ultimate price for your success. The irony is not lost on you, even through the haze of fever. Penned, you had watched Henry's previous wives fail in their primary duty. Catherine, with her endless miscarriages. Anne, with her dangerous daughter. And you had believed that you could succeed where they had failed. You were right. But success in Tudor England often comes with a price that makes failure seem merciful. You remember the day Henry first noticed you, serving as lady-in-waiting to Anne Boleyn, watching from the shadows as the queen, who had once seemed so powerful, was gradually destroyed by her inability to produce a male heir. You had learned from Anne's mistakes, crafting yourself into everything she wasn't quiet, where she was outspoken, submissive where she was challenging, modest where she was fashionable. Your seduction of Henry VIII was the opposite of Anne's dramatic campaign, where Anne had used her sexuality as a weapon. You wielded yours like a shield, protective, defensive, designed to deflect rather than provoke. You presented yourself as the perfect feminine ideal of Tudor England, beautiful but not vain, intelligent but not threatening, passionate but not demanding. The timing of your courtship was crucial and calculated. Henry was already looking for reasons to rid himself of Anne when you began to catch his attention in 1535. You were smart enough to learn from your predecessor's mistakes. You refused his advances until marriage was certain, but you did pursue with gentle submission rather than Anne's imperious demands. Your betrothal to Henry was announced the day after Anne Boleyn's execution, a piece of timing so callous that it shocked even the cynical Tudor court. You had literally stepped over Anne's corpse to reach the throne, and everyone knew it. The blood was barely dry on the scaffold when Henry was planning his next wedding, his next attempt to secure the dynasty that had eluded him for so long. Your wedding 10 days later was a muted affair, conducted without the grand celebrations that had marked Henry's previous marriages. England was still processing the fact that their king had just murdered his second wife, and there was little appetite for festivities. You understood that your role was to restore stability and respectability to the monarchy, not to provide entertainment. The sexual aspect of your marriage was complicated by the weight of expectation and the shadow of your predecessor's failures. Every encounter with Henry was conducted under the enormous pressure of succession anxiety. He wasn't making love to his wife. He was attempting to create the male heir that had eluded him for nearly 3 decades. Henry's body had changed dramatically since his younger days. By 1536, he was 45 years old, massively overweight, and suffering from what was probably diabetes and a severely infected leg wound that never properly healed. His legendary sexual prowess was largely in the past, replaced by the physical limitations of a man whose body was failing even as his need for an heir became more desperate. You approached your marital duties with the same careful strategy that had won you the crown. You were enthusiastic enough to maintain Henry's interest, but not so passionate as to seem immodest. You were fertile enough to conceive quickly, but not so eager as to appear lustful. You walked the narrow line between all the contradictory expectations placed on Tudor wives with the skill of a diplomat navigating a minefield. When you became pregnant almost immediately after your marriage, the relief was overwhelming, but also terrifying. Pregnancy validated your worth as a wife and queen, but it also put enormous pressure on the outcome. If you produced another daughter like Anne, you knew your fate would likely be similar. If you miscarried like Catherine had so many times, you'd be branded as cursed or barren. Your pregnancy was difficult from the beginning, marked by severe morning sickness that left you weak and nauseated for months. The court physicians, led by Dr. William Butts, monitored your condition with the intensity of astronomers studying a comet. Every symptom was analyzed, every change in your condition reported to the king, every aspect of your pregnancy treated as a matter of national security. You were constantly reminded that the future of the Tudor dynasty depended on what was growing in your womb. Courtiers watched your expanding belly with the fascination of gamblers studying dice, placing bets on the sex of your child and speculating about your chances of survival. The pressure was so intense that you sometimes felt like your body wasn't your own but belonged to the realm. When you went into labor in October 1537, the entire kingdom held its breath. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 3 days, as you struggled to deliver the child that everyone hoped would secure England's future. The pain was excruciating, but you endured it with the stoicism that had become your trademark, knowing that complaint or weakness would be seen as failure. The moment Edward was born and his sex confirmed, the kingdom erupted in celebration. Bells rang out across England. Bonfires were lit in every village, and Henry wept with joy at finally achieving his life's ambition. You had succeeded where Catherine and Anne had failed. You had given England its male heir. But your triumph was within days of Edward's birth. You developed the symptoms of puerperal, sepsis, childbed fever, a common postpartum infection that was almost always fatal in the 16th century. Your body, weakened by the difficult labor and the physical demands of pregnancy, couldn't fight off the infection that was slowly poisoning your blood. The fever began as a mild discomfort, but quickly escalated into delirium and agony. Your body burned with heat while you shivered uncontrollably, your mind drifting between consciousness and hallucination as the infection spread through your system. The court physicians tried every remedy they knew: bloodletting, purging, herbal concoctions, but nothing could stop the inexorable progress of the disease. Henry, for perhaps the first time in his life, was genuinely helpless. The man who had moved heaven and earth to marry you, who had executed wives and destroyed kingdoms in pursuit of a male heir, could only watch as the woman who had given him everything he wanted slipped away. His grief was real and profound, perhaps because you were dying at the moment of your greatest success rather than your greatest failure, as you lie here now, feeling your strength ebb away like tide retreating from the shore. You understand the cruel mathematics of Tudor wifehood. Even when you do everything perfectly, even when you succeed at your primary function, even when you give the king exactly what he wants, you still might die for the privilege. Your final weeks are spent in agony, your body ravaged by infection, while your mind struggles to comprehend the injustice of dying just as you've achieved everything you worked for. You've given Henry his precious son, secured the Tudor succession, and earned a place in history as the wife who finally delivered, and your reward is a slow, painful death at 28 years old. Being Henry VIII's perfect wife was indeed a death sentence, just one with better publicity than the fates that befell Catherine and Anne. You succeeded where they failed, but success in Tudor England was often more dangerous than failure, and perfection was the most dangerous quality. Of all tomorrow, you will be dead, and Henry will begin looking for wife number 4. Your son will grow up without you. Your triumph will be overshadowed by your tragedy, and your story will serve as a reminder that in Tudor England, even getting everything right could still go catastrophically wrong. You are Margaret Cavendish, daughter of Dr. Thomas Cavendish, one of London's most respected physicians, and you're sitting in your father's study surrounded by medical texts that contain more knowledge about the human body than most people will ever possess. The irony is bitter. You understand anatomy, disease, and the mechanics of reproduction better than any woman in England. Yet this knowledge has become a curse rather than a blessing in navigating your own intimate life. Your education began early, when your father, having no sons to carry on his medical practice, decided to teach his brightest daughter the healing arts. By age 12, you could identify herbs, prepare medicines, and assist with surgical procedures that would make most grown men faint. By 16, you understood the female reproductive system better than most midwives, having studied anatomical drawings smuggled from Italian universities where dissection was permitted. This knowledge sets you apart from other women in ways that make marriage negotiations complicated and dangerous. You know that the Church's teachings about female anatomy are largely incorrect, that many folk remedies are useless or harmful, and that much of what passes for medical wisdom is superstition dressed up in Latin phrases. But expressing this knowledge publicly would mark you as dangerously learned, possibly heretical, and certainly unmarriageable. Your father has received several marriage proposals for you, but each negotiation founders on the same problem: your education. Potential suitors are simultaneously attracted to and threatened by your knowledge. They want a wife who can manage household health and assist with medical emergencies, but they don't want a woman who might challenge their authority or demonstrate superior knowledge in public. The most serious proposal came from Master Edmund Hartwell, a successful apothecary who saw the advantage of marrying into a medical family. Your father approved of the match, seeing it as a way to combine two complementary practices and ensure your financial security. But the courtship revealed the fundamental problem with being an educated woman in Tudor England. Your knowledge was simultaneously valuable and threatening. Edmund wanted to benefit from your medical skills while ensuring that you never appeared more knowledgeable than him in public. He expected you to assist with difficult cases, but defer to his judgment in all matters. You were supposed to be learned enough to be useful, but submissive enough to maintain his masculine authority. The contradiction was impossible to resolve. Your understanding of female sexuality and reproduction makes you acutely aware of the dangers that other women face in ignorance. You know that many deaths in childbirth could be prevented with proper hygiene and positioning. You understand that certain herbs can safely prevent conception or ease menstrual pain. You recognize the symptoms of diseases that are commonly misdiagnosed or ignored. But sharing this knowledge is dangerous. Helping women prevent pregnancy could lead to accusations of witchcraft. Contradicting established medical practice could destroy your father's reputation. Demonstrating superior knowledge to male physicians could result in charges of practicing medicine without proper authority. Your education has made you a prisoner of your own expertise. The sexual aspect of your potential marriage to Edmund was discussed with a frankness that would shock most women, but felt clinical and cold to you. Your father and Edmund negotiated the terms of your physical relationship like a business contract: frequency of conjugal visits, expectations for conception, procedures for managing pregnancy and childbirth. Your medical knowledge reduced your own sexuality to a series of biological functions to be optimized for reproductive success. You understand the mechanics of sexual pleasure in ways that most women don't. Having studied anatomical texts that describe the female body's capacity for physical satisfaction, but this knowledge feels more like a burden than a gift, because you also understand how rarely women experience such pleasure in marriages focused primarily on reproduction and male satisfaction. Your father's medical practice has given you intimate knowledge of the sexual problems that plague Tudor marriages. You've assisted with examinations of women suffering from painful intercourse, helped treat men with sexual dysfunction, and prepared remedies for couples struggling with infertility. You know that many sexual problems stem from ignorance, fear, and the pressure to perform, rather than from physical abnormalities. The contradiction between your theoretical knowledge and your practical inexperience creates its own form of anxiety. You understand the anatomy of sexual response, but have never experienced it. You know the signs of pregnancy but have never carried a child. You can diagnose sexual dysfunction in others but have no framework for understanding your own desires or preferences. Your medical knowledge also makes you acutely aware of the risks associated with pregnancy and childbirth. You've seen too many women die from complications that might have been preventable. Watched too many families destroyed by maternal mortality. Assisted with too many difficult births that ended in tragedy. The prospect of your own pregnancy fills you with clinical dread rather than joyful anticipation. The engagement to Edmund eventually ended when he realized that your knowledge would always threaten his authority. During a dinner with his family, you corrected his diagnosis of a patient's condition, citing anatomical evidence that contradicted his treatment plan. The humiliation of being corrected by a woman, even one with superior knowledge, was more than his masculine pride could bear. Now, at 24, you remain unmarried and increasingly unmarriageable. Your father is aging, and you know that. Your future security depends on finding a husband who can appreciate your knowledge without being threatened by it. But such men are rare in Tudor England, where female learning is viewed with suspicion and female expertise is seen as a challenge to natural order. You spend your days assisting your father with patients, preparing medicines, and studying medical texts that arrive from continental universities. Your nights are spent wondering what it would feel like to share your knowledge with a partner who valued your expertise, to experience the physical intimacy you understand so well in theory, to find someone who could see your education as an asset rather than a liability. Your medical knowledge has given you insights into the human body that few people possess. But it has also isolated you from the normal experiences of womanhood in Tudor England. You are too educated for most men, too knowledgeable for conventional marriage, and too valuable to your father's practice to be easily spared. Sometimes you wonder if knowledge truly is power, or if it's simply another form of imprisonment for women who dare to learn too much in a world that prefers them ignorant and compliant. You are Sister Marguerite, and you're kneeling in the chapel of Sion Abbey at 3 in the morning, trying to pray away the dreams that have been tormenting your sleep for months. The stone floor is cold against your knees, the darkness broken only by the flickering light of votive candles that cast dancing shadows across. The carved faces of saints who seem to watch your struggle with knowing eyes. You entered the convent at 16, not from a divine calling, but because your father could not afford dowries for all 4 of his daughters, and the church offered a respectable alternative to spinsterhood or an impoverished marriage. 7 years later, you understand that choosing religious life to escape the complications of sexuality has only made those complications more intense and more forbidden. The dreams that wake you in the night are vivid and disturbing, not because they're violent or frightening, but because they're tender and passionate in ways that your religious education has taught you to fear. You dream of gentle hands touching your skin, of lips pressed against yours, of the weight of a body above you that brings pleasure rather than pain. You wake from these dreams with your heart racing and your body responding in ways that make you burn with shame Your confessor, Father Benedict, has tried to help you understand these temptations as tests of your faith, trials sent by God to strengthen your